Hi, welcome to Angel's Nook. If you like our videos, please like, comment, and especially subscribe so you know when the next one comes out. And if you're commenting, please let us know what you like, what you're interested in, what's helping you, and what you might like to see in the future. Thanks for stopping by.
Takoda here. When I was a wee pup, me mum got really upset when I stained the floor. But now she wants to show you how to do it. I will never understand human logic.
A lot of you have been trying to figure out how to use oil-based stains, and they're very different than the water-based antiquing gels by HTP. The oil-based gels are solvent-based. They require mineral spirits for cleanup. They have a longer dry time. Most of the time it's 24 to 48 hours. But if they're applied thickly, it could be 72 hours. And that all depends on temperature and humidity because oil-based dries slower than paint. And so there are a number of different methodologies for how to apply it. One of the things that makes HTP stains wonderful to work with is the stain and the top coat are already together. Now, there are some other products on the market that have stain and top coat together, but they're not, in my opinion, as easy to use as this is and as versatile, because you can use this the same way as you would use what is called a penetrating stain. And a penetrating stain is very thin. It will still have the odor because it's oil-based, but it will go on in a very liquid format. And wiping it back is different than when you're working with a gel. All of the gel stains need to be gently but thoroughly stirred before you use them. The oil-based stains can be mixed together. They can be blended in layers, but all of that will be a totally different video because what I want to address today is the basics of the different tools and application techniques for applying stain so that you have some choices and you understand what might be going wrong when you're trying to use it yourself. It does have a learning curve, but once you've got it down, it gives you a lot of versatility and a lot of options for what you can do. The fact that you can apply it in different ways and you can actually create on a piece of wood, perhaps a piece from Asia that has very little grain in it. By using the gel stain and a chip brush, you can actually put in some faux grain to give it a better, richer look. So when you're deciding what you want to do, I like this product very much because I'm going to show you how to use it on raw wood, which many people would just use a penetrating stain on, but it works just as well on raw wood as it does over a finish that has like the honey oak finish or another type of finish that is on your wood cabinets. This can go over it. This can also handle going over the wood that is the laminate, that is a faux wood finish already. It's a fake finish on your cabinets, but this will sit on top of it and complete a finish. Whereas a penetrating stain will not do that. It will just bead up and you've got a mess. So you want to make sure that you have gloves on, you want to make sure your surrounding area is protected, and you want to make sure you have mineral spirits available because you can wash your brushes out easily. The things that don't wash easily are the foam brushes and the microfiber sponges that we're going to be using. So let's get started on seeing all the different ways you can do this. We're going to be looking at applying stain today, both over raw wood and over stained finished wood that's been previously done and sealed with polyurethanes or whatever top coat. Raw wood is the easiest way to start with stains, and there's a whole variety of tools that can be used. These boards have been cleaned off using a wipe. They had been in the garage. I'm hoping I'm not going to find oil on here that I did not know was there. But you can tell it needed the cleaning. But the wipes prevent this from raising the grain. Your solvent-based, or what many people call oil-based products, don't raise the grain in wood. It's only water-based products that do, or water itself. So what I'm going to be using for this is tobacco. It's going to allow you to see the grain, and it's going to allow you to see different ways of doing this. There are microfiber pads that are out now. There are also ones that you can cut. I dislike using one this size on small pieces like this because it's a waste of the pad. You're going to wind up using it all and having to throw it away because it becomes stiff. So you can cut it into smaller pieces. Just realize you're not using the foam part, you're using the outer microfiber for it. Chip brushes can be used. Chip brushes, you need to rub those really hard in different directions, back and forth in your hand, to knock off any loose bristles that are in them. If you still get it, you can pick them up. I often keep an old pair of tweezers when I'm staining, so I can just grab it with that and then re-smooth it when I'm working. Foam disposable brushes work. You can use small stain brushes. This is one from HTP. You can also use cloth, old pieces. This is an old piece of a t-shirt. And people kind of find the way that works best for them. And you also find that you'll use a different material to apply stain depending on whether you're using it as a penetrating stain, whether you're using it on a large surface or a small surface that has lots of intricate details in it that you want to make sure when you're wiping off that you're not leaving globs in there that are going to not leave you with a good finish. The pads themselves would be very helpful, like over a large surface of a table, a countertop, a large piece of the top of a dresser, something like that. These would be a very good width to apply. So what I'm going to start with is the microfiber. Now, HTP is a topical gel stain. It's not like the liquid penetrating stains that you may have seen or worked with in the past. And that is a very different, it's a different process working with this because it's thick and you tend to apply too much easily because it doesn't take much of this to go a long way. And I'm actually going to do this with the microfiber because I want to get an even amount on there, not a mess of it. Now, this down here, if I were working on this because it's going this direction, you can see that by not having it heavy on there, and then you can use a clean spot of it, allows me to control the coverage of it. If this, when I get it all finished, is not dark enough for me, I can go back 24 hours later or after it is no longer tacky. Stains dry differently in different temperatures and humidity, so you want it not to be tacky. And if you're going to apply a second layer of the stain to get a deeper color, you also want to lightly sand it with a clean, new green scrubby, or a green scrubby that has no other use except to work with stain. And then you would wipe off any of that residue with a damp paper towel with just water, works fine. And then you can apply your next coat of it. The next thing I'm going to do applying this is to use the cloth. And if you're doing that, you wrap it around your fingers. You can get, again, I like to even it out, and then I can do the same thing. In this case, I can feel that I need more. I don't like to have globs that I have to clean off. Now, one of the things that this can be very useful for is where you have areas that you might have had some lights and darks, and the cloth will allow you to even that out, or even because I'm rubbing this into the wood, I'm forcing it to act more like a penetrating stain. And you should be able to see that this is a little darker than this. I'm going to just use the stain that's on here for the moment with got a piece from where I trimmed that. Well, there's not enough there. Still not enough. To get the foam to move well, you have to have more of the stain on it. Now, if this, because you can still see the grain, the foam can be a really good option, or simply adding more to the microfiber. You can see that this cutting board had been used, so that's why there are cut marks in it. But again, I'm going to want to wipe back. You can do that with a lint-free cloth, or in my case, I'm just going to use the side of that t-shirt that I haven't used. You could also use the other side of this. But you can see I'm getting an even coverage with this. Chip brush, because it's creating some lines here, can help you if you've got dark and light spots, which you'll see when I do it over a finish. If you've got a surface that doesn't really have much grain to it, the chip brush can give you that, or just like the other ones, you can simply just wipe back. You don't want to wait a long time, especially if you're doing a large surface. You don't want to wait to wipe back because you're going to start to get lap marks, which you don't want. And the last is if you want to use the stain brush. The stain brush tends to put it on heavier, and you don't want to put a big globby amount of it on. Because then it just becomes like paint over your surface. Because you've got ridges in this, if you're wanting to, from the brush, if you're wanting to see the original grain, you would need to wipe this back. But if you put on a heavy amount to change the color, you can no longer see the grain underneath. And unless it's just that color that you're wanting, in my opinion, if you're gonna do solid color with stain, you're treating it like a paint, and it's much friendlier and easier to just use paint at that point. But you can see any of the methods give you exactly the same look with the stain. And this over raw wood will dry pretty quickly. This will definitely be ready by tomorrow, or even later today, with as dry as this wood is, to apply an additional coat on it. And I will do that for you so that you can see how adding another coat will deepen the color for you. This has been deglossed off camera. It's a honey oak door, and the finish is in decent shape on it. Because I'm doing a demonstration here, there's a few little flecks of paint on here that I'm not going to mess with. Over a finish, using a stain as a topical stain is where it becomes trickier. So one of the things is it's not going to soak into the wood. So when you're putting it on, you don't want a lot on there, and you want your last movement to be in the direction of the grain. You should be able to see how much more this has warmed this. These areas are where I don't like pads like this, because it starts to move in different directions, and if you're not working quickly enough, then you will wind up with marks on here, especially like going across here. You'll have a line of stain going across here that's not coming down this way. So for me, that's where I prefer, in areas like this, to be using a cloth that has stain on it and doesn't have a lot, because I can control it. I can keep it going in the correct direction. And you can see I'm not applying this heavy like paint. Get a little bit more on there for you to let you see how it can blend. This allows me to get in, but since I can't get into those corners, I will do that with the brush in just a minute. But this gives me a lot of control on those edges. And I can push my finger in the cloth. That's a little bit heavy. I'm barely touching that to wipe any back off of it. It's a very, very light touch. If you do a hard touch, you will definitely pull all the stain right back off of a finish. And you don't want to do that. It defeats the purpose. The next one I'll do is doing a foam brush. And because of how much you need to have on the foam, it's going to require being wiped back. You use the corners of it or the corners of a brush to get into those edges. lightly coming back. Since you're going to have to use another tool in something like a cabinet door, for me, doing the whole cabinet door with a cloth is easier. Chip brush. You can see the chip brush is not giving me as much buildup close to that edge. You can use a cloth, you can use the microfiber, but it is a very light touch to bring this off. I'm not rubbing hard at all. And the last. With the brush, to keep from getting a buildup there or there, the sponge doesn't cooperate as much, but you can start in the middle. And because I don't have much stain on here, I can actually blend this out with just the brush without having to go back heavy into it. But if I go into it heavy, like this, you have obliterated your grain, pretty much. And thick like this will take probably 72 hours to not be tacky. Put on like this, in most of the time, will no longer be tacky after 24 hours, at most 48. There are other things that you can do with these stains, which I'll be putting in another video of layering them, mixing them, but I wanted you to have the basics of just the simple steps and ways that you can apply this finish. This does not need a second coat over it because it's not soaking in. I will show you the second coat on the raw wood, and then you'll know what the basics are for how to do this. One of the things I failed to mention when I started staining this, especially if you are new to staining or you are not sure at all what kind of raw wood you are dealing with, a really good plan is to get from the hardware store what is called wood conditioner, and putting one coat of that onto your wood, allowing it to dry, and then start your staining process. Your stains will still go into the wood like this did, but they will go evenly. The wood conditioner prevents you from having light and dark blotchy marks underneath your stain. I knew what I was dealing with here, so I did not need to use it. And I've used stain for most of my life. So we're going to put a second coat of stain on these. You can see the one that I put it on really heavy, basically pretty much looks like brown paint. It's a pretty shade of brown, but it really doesn't look like stain, a stained piece. And there are tricks to doing stain over, say, a white or a brown or some paint color, but that's for an entirely different video because it's a lot more steps, and I want to give you fast steps for the basics here. So I'm going to start with the microfiber again. And again, it's a gentle touch, smoothing that. And because I'm going over the second layer of this, it's behaving more like over a previous finish, because there is finish here, there just isn't top coat. And you can see the coloration that's coming up there. I can also do the same thing with cloth. I put it on a little bit thinner by putting it on with the cloth, but you can see that that's a richer tone to it. But you can also see I am not applying this heavy like paint. A little bit of this goes a really long way. You're going to see some lap lines here because I'm using different techniques. So they're going over each other and creating some overlap, which is another reason why when you're doing it, do one technique with it, do the whole thing, and do sections at a time. Like on a long counter, do a section like this wide down the whole thing. If you blend it, wipe it back, whatever you have to do, then come into the next one and barely get into where you've already worked. I'm going to leave this because it's looking good the way it is. And you saw when I pounced right there, trying to get into this. This tends to leave some lines of stain if you're not careful. And the last one I'll do here. And that's another thing you can do along where you're meeting up. You can turn your brush or your tool endwise. If you needed more grain to come through because the wood that you're working over is one of the woods from Asia that has very little grain, this would be perfect because it would leave you grain lines. But since this has grain under it, I can pull it back. And go the entire length. Don't do starts and stops or you'll get lap marks where that happened. And now you can see what it looked like with one coat and two coats, depending on the method that you're using. It needs some practice. Practice on the back of your cabinet doors. Practice on a spare piece of raw wood, because there is definitely a learning curve to stain, but it gives you all different kinds of possibilities. And if you're wanting to change the color of your cabinets with stain, if you pick something that's super close to the same color, you won't see very much differentiation at all. So you need to think about that for whether you're trying to refresh your cabinets or you want a totally different stain look. Thanks for watching.